All right, so we got one more war that we want to talk about real quickly with Saul, as he has. Jonathan is becoming more popular than him because and Saul wanted to kill his own son because he made that decree: anyone who eats something, and he ate some honey, not knowing about the decree, and Jonathan, the people interceded on his behalf and kept Saul from killing his own son. Well, now let's turn to 1 Samuel 15. I'm going to read a little bit of it. We're not going to read all of it. Samuel told Saul, "The Lord sent me to anoint you as king over his people Israel. Now listen to the words. This is what the Lord says to armies. I witnessed that the Amalekites did to the Israelites when they opposed them along the way as they're coming out of Egypt." You got to go all the way back to Exodus for that. They were opposing them after they came out of Exodus. Now the Amalekites still haven't done right. So it says, now go and attack the Amalekites and completely destroy everything they have. Don't spare any of them. Kill men, women, infants, nursing babies, oxen, sheep, camels, and donkeys, which sounds absolutely horrid to us. And would have been for them too. This is something that they would have been freaking, but this was what would have been known as a holy war, something that they would have been this harem. There would have been where you have to kill everything, and it had a purpose, and it was to and a lot of it is actually hyperbole. They don't actually kill everyone. We see this in the Bible on several occasions where it says wipe them all out, and then we see them again. So you're like, wait, did they not wipe them out? Or it's hyperbole, which is that language that blows. We use it all the time. We love hyperbole, right? I'm so hungry, I could eat a horse. You're never going to eat a horse, but we always exaggerate. We're really big into exaggeration, so we could do. So a lot of that kind of language is hyperbole, but they've been commanded to kill them all. Now, when the battle occurs, and you can read on in 15, Saul does not keep the provision of holy war. He doesn't kill Agag, the Amalekite king, nor does he destroy their herds, and he took spoils of war. Now, we can make Saul out to be a hero for not killing, everything. But look what he's saving. It's not the babies and the infants. It's not the mothers. He doesn't kill the king of the Amalekites, nor the herds or the spoils of war. He's killing, dogs named Fluffy even die. He saves, he only saves what will increase his own power. Yeah, he's saving what will go for himself, what will grow my harem, will grow my power, my authority. So Saul has obviously not been following the Lord. He's become very much consumed with himself. All right, so we get to chapter 16, and we see a new character arrive on the scene. Now, if you don't know who this is, you're going to. This is one of the most important characters in the Old Testament. Nowhere near is he perfect, but he's seen as God's anointed man, God's king, he is one of the people that they're always looking forward to. Jesus from the line of David. It's important that Matthew makes a big point of this. Luke makes a big point of this. They want to say that it's from the line of David that Jesus comes. It's a very big deal. I like this, chapter 16. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long are you going to mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him over king of Israel?" So Samuel's already kind of actually sad. But Saul, God's like, you know what? He's no longer king. Fill your horn with oil and go, and I'm sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem, because I have selected for myself the king from his sons. Now, notice it's from the house of bread. Jesse will be there, and that's why it's important. That's why the New Testament scholars make such a big deal in getting Jesus. I mean, they could have just left it out, right? They didn't have to tell us where he was born. But they make a big deal of telling us he was born in Bethlehem because that's where David's from. That's why it's in there. I mean, John, he's like cosmology, God, he was God, is God before there was, he's cosmic looking. Mark just jumps right into the matter. He skips the birth narrative altogether. But the other two, they want to make a point of where Jesus came from because they want him to be, because it has to be from the line of David. It's very important that he becomes from the line of David. Samuel asked, "How can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me." Sounds about right. Kings, if you're trying to overthrow a king, guess what they're going to do? Yeah, this is normal behavior. He's probably right. And the Lord has, take a young cow with you and say, I have come to sacrifice the Lord. Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will let you know what you are to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate to you. And Samuel did what the Lord directed and went to Bethlehem. When the elders of the town met with him, they trembled and asked, "Do you come in peace?" "In peace," he replied. "I have come to sacrifice the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and said, "Certainly, the Lord's appointment is before him." He looks exactly at the same way remember Saul, when he anointed Saul? Head over everyone else, looked the part of a king. Well, he sees Eliab and says, "Oh, that looks the part of a king. Surely that's the Lord's appointed person." But the Lord says to Samuel, "Do not look upon his appearance or his stature, because I have rejected him. Humans do not see what the Lord sees, for humans see what is visible. The Lord sees the heart." And Jesse calls Abinadab and presented him to Samuel. And the Lord hasn't chosen this one either. And Shema, and the Lord chose this one either. And Jesse presented 7 of his sons, and Samuel told, "The Lord hasn't chosen any of these." Are these all the sons you have? This kind of reminds me. Have you guys ever seen Cinderella? Sure, this is all you have with the shoe? Of course, Cinderella comes much after this. So they might have been, I don't know, maybe the authors of Cinderella were stealing from this book. I don't know. And Samuel says, "Are these all your sons?" "They're still the youngest," but right now he's tending the sheep. And Samuel told Jesse, "Send for him. We won't sit down and eat until he gets here." So Jesse sent for him, and this could have been a long ways. We don't know exactly how far he was when he said, "But shepherds take their flocks to where there's grass and water." It could have been a long ways. And he had beautiful eyes and healthy, handsome appearance, and the Lord said, "Anoint him, for he is the one." So Samuel took a horn of oil and appointed him in the presence of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully on David on that day forward. And Samuel set out and went to Ramah. No, he didn't go back to Saul was. He might have been a little scared there, But then as we continue on the story, we get really 2 different stories how David is introduced to the court. Some authors who like to pick things apart will say, well, they're 2 different separate stories that, but realistically, they could have been the same person. Saul, knowing this is the point of bringing him in front of the king, so he would have been, getting familiar with court procedures and stuff like this, so that he would have been there. Very possible that he was brought in. But Saul is tormented by evil spirits in 16:14 through 23. Now the Spirit of the Lord left Saul. Remember I talked on Sunday about how the Holy Spirit comes and goes in the Old Testament, that's the Holy Spirit right there. The Spirit of the Lord left Saul, and the evil spirit sent from the Lord began to torment him. Now, in the Old Testament, they don't really attribute any, like, there's the idea of this devil character hasn't really shown up yet. That's really something that begins to develop later on. At this time, everything comes from God. And you're going to see some passages that seem like contradictions. They're really not. They're just the way people are looking at it. Everything's by God, allowed by God, but they haven't really developed this idea of Satan yet, like we have now. And that really hasn't been something they developed yet. Remember, the Hebrew Bible is a story of a developing relationship with God. And so the Lord, and this evil spirit, what is this evil spirit? Well, it very well, I've had people that are psychologists, like I said, it feels like bipolar or PTSD or something along those lines, that he's suffering from some kind of mental illness that he can't get over, some kind of depression, mental illness, PTSD. Now, we're past the point where we're trying to excel demons for someone with PTSD, but at the same time, there's this dichotomy we have to work through. When do we cast out demons, and when is it like a mental illness that we can, that isn't, it's a physical element versus, and that's something we have to wrestle with, because sometimes it is a demon. And sometimes it's just something we might want to commit to demons, but it's something that, something else. But it says here, this evil spirit comes upon him. Let your Lord command you. And God may have allowed this evil spirit to come because he's saying it's time for you to leave. And Saul's like, no, I'm not leaving. I'm not letting someone else take my place. I'm the king now. Saul never wants to become king, and he never wants to stop being king. But isn't that the way it works often, right? We may not want the position of authority, but when we got the authority, we don't give it up. So this says, let your Lord command you, the servants in your presence, to look for someone who knows how to play the lyre. And when the evil spirit comes, that person can play the lyre, and you will feel better. Then Saul commands his servants, find someone who plays well and bring him to me. And one of the young men answered, I've seen the son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the lyre. He is also a valiant man, a warrior, elegant, handsome, with the Lord with him. And Saul dispatched the messengers to Jesse, and send me your son David, who is with the sheep. He already knows he's with the sheep because he's already anointed him. So Jesse took the donkey's load with the bread, wineskin, the young goats, and sent him this by his son David to Saul. And when David came to Saul and entered his service, Saul loved him very much, and David became his armor bearer. This is one part that people kind of get confused with. He becomes his armor bearer, but the next chapter he doesn't seem to really know him. And that may be, but if Saul's struggling with some mental issues, he may just not really know him. He may put him as an armor bearer position, and he may really not know him. Some people have a problem with that, but with a kingship position, I actually have very little issue with that. I think it's something that would be kind of common. Sure, who are you again? And the Lord says to Jesse, let David remain in my service, for he has found favor with me. When the Spirit of God came, Saul, he picked up his player. And this, what this does, and this is important for David's life, is he will put him, one, in the court and make him armor bearer, but he will also put him in the position which we are introduced to him as a musician, which, I don't know if you've read the Psalms, but many of the Psalms are credited to or in the style of David. It shows us his music, and tradition that will continue on. We say, well, this is from that's why he's able to write all these beautiful poems and psalms and songs and don't ask me to sing them, but many of the psalms are meant to be sung in their original Hebrew. And no, I'm not going to sing them. And everyone can say amen because they don't want me to sing. But it does introduce him as the psalmist. 1 Samuel 17. The Philistines gathered their forces to war at Sokoh in Judah and compared with Sokoh and Azekah and Ephes Damim. I'm sure I mispronounced that. And Saul and the men of Israel gathered to the camp of the valley of Elah, and they lined up in battle formation to face the Philistines. Remember those Philistines? We're seeing them over and over and over again. Philistines are still playing on the field. They're the ones that are pushing out once again. Remember, we looked at the map. The Philistines are right by the coast. The Israelites are right beside them. So if the Philistines need to grow, where are they growing? Right into the Israelites. So they're always going to be at war with the Israelites because they have to. I mean, there's no. We're still seeing this war going on today. The Philistines are where Palestine come from, and the Israelites, and it's the same battle. It looks different, sounds different, but it's the same thing. Yeah, we're there. We're right there. Yeah.
My brothers playing with cousins. They stood over here and said, "I'm over here. I dare you cross this line."
That is kind of how it is. I dare you to cross this line. I'm Red Rover, or I dare you to step on my side of the. That's kind of how it feels. But this is actually a common way battle was fought back then. Remember, they're farmers and shepherds and stuff like that. So you'd have to wait for your men to show up. So they would stand on one side of the hill, and this would stuff with the ravine and the other. You'd go down into the valley and fight, and then you'd go back on your mountaintops and they while you're sitting there staring at each other, waiting for people to show up, you'd yell insults at each other. And you scream and shout at each other, and we recreate this in summer camp. Football teams, we got. But also another common practice is because they're farmers and merchants, is they would often elect a champion and say, okay, you fight the battle, okay, and you fight the battle, and whoever wins the whole battle. So the champions come and meet, and that way you didn't lose all this excess life. Because, as a king, even if you lost the battle, you could still retreat, and you would still have all your farmers and your merchants. And if you lost everyone in one big battle, guess what? You're not going to have enough crops for the next year. You're not going to have people You're not going to have enough children born to replace the army. And so this was actually pretty common. And so they come out, and it says the champion name was Goliath from Gath. He came out from the Philistine camp. He's 10 foot tall? 6 cubits and a span. So that'd be about 10 feet. It's a big dude.
Was he related to Samson? Like cousins?
Probably not, actually. Some people suggest that he might have been the last of the Nephilim.
Yeah.
But he's a big dude. And he's not so you see some of the people that are so tall and they're like all skin and bones, and they're just, no, that's not how Goliath is described. He's described as a big giant of a man with a sword that he could wield. Yeah, these it's a. I mean, I can't imagine. This is how tall. 10 feet tall is the basketball hoop at the gym. I mean, he's hitting his head on the rim. That's how tall he is. We're all proud of these guys all dunking on that. He just walks up there and hits his head on it. That's there is a disease that causes that. That can cause, but a lot of them are real gangly and not able to fight, and so it really seems like this man is just from a descendant from a line of big people. And we don't like to think of people this big, but we actually have some outliers. They're not the norm in archaeology that are this big. Yeah, I have no idea. So no one of the Israelites dared to take up the challenge, even though Saul had offered him even his daughter in marriage. So David comes to the battlefield. So he's not already there. He's the armor bearer, I thought. Well, apparently he's gone home to take care of the sheep. He arrives to the battlefield, bringing supplies to his brothers. Now, we think this is odd because we're like, well, doesn't the military provide supplies? Mm-mm. Not only did you have to show up, take time off from your field or your sheep or whatever, you had to bring your own weapon, which most of these people would have been using, bows. David uses a sling, which is a weapon for hunting, for getting rid of the wolves and the lions and whatnot that are trying to get the sheep. Bows, sticks, iron would have been very rare. Some of the veterans may have had an iron sword, but most of them probably did not. And then on top of that, you got to provide your own food. The only way the king paid you is if you won victories and took the spoils of war. And so that's one of the reasons why not every battle is a holy war where they destroy everything, because otherwise you wouldn't be paid at all, and all the people would leave. I'm not doing this. No, there's, you have to provide your own food. So he's brought food for his supplies for his brothers who are in the battle. And when he gets there and he sees everyone just kind of standing there saying, I'm not going to fight Goliath, David responds and volunteers to fight, Now Saul, hearing this, is relieved to have someone who will meet Goliath's challenge and offers David his armor. David doesn't have any armor. He's a shepherd. He's probably wearing his shepherd's clothes, stuff that is made out of sheep's wool and maybe even some skin. And he's offering him his armor, which is probably the best armor in the camp. And David refuses it, and he chooses his sling. You guys all seen a sling? It's a leather pouch with two strings attached to it, and you whip it over your head, or you can whip it sideways. Really good. You can do it with both hands. But people that are skilled in it can do it with great accuracy and are quite deadly with it. He goes down. We actually have accounts where the sling was used in like ancient battles, like in Egypt. Like you see them fighting with slings in some of the artwork. It's kind of cool. It was a weapon. Of course, a lot of things that we think of, that's a weapon. Like the yo-yo was originally a weapon too. It was a weapon in Asia. It's a children's toy now. It was originally a weapon. No, just wood. smack someone with it, it comes back to you, and you smack them again. But, if you hit someone with a fast yo-yo, you can break a nose or jaw or whatever. Throwing that thing hard. Be better at it than I am. I get it to go up and down. That's all I get to do with it. But, this is a sling was a weapon. It was regularly used as a weapon. So David takes 5 stones from the river, goes down and takes 5 smooth stones from the river. And he uses, how many? 1. He takes it, whips it, hits the giant between the eyes, knocking him unconscious. Does he quit? No. Is the Goliath dead? No. He goes over and takes Goliath's giant sword, picks it up and drops it on the head and beheads him. David's success leads to a routing of the Philistines, which, if we've already seen Saul, and we've seen how he's behaved to his son. This is not his son. Saul becomes very, very jealous of David. Chapter 18. When David had finished speaking with Saul, Jonathan was bound to David in close friendship and loved him as much as he loved himself. And Saul kept David with him from that day on and did not let him return to his father's house. Jonathan made a covenant with David, and he loved him as much as himself. And Jonathan removed the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his military tunic, his sword, and his belt. Now, some people want to make this a homosexual thing, but that's not really what's going on here. That's a sign of respect and saying, hey, you're my brother. I'm giving you my possessions because I'm sharing, like you are now sharing in my wealth as prince. You are taking, it's giving him a high place in it's high honor. But some people want to make it a homosexual thing because they want an excuse from the Bible. And it's just not in there. David marched out with the army and was successful in everything Saul sent him to do. Saul put him in command of the fighting men, which pleased all the people and Saul's servants as well. As the troops were coming back, when David was returning from killing the Philistines, the woman came out from the cities of Israel to meet King Saul, singing and dancing with tambourines, with shouts of joy and 3-string instruments and dancing. They sang, Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his tens of thousands. Uh-oh. Yeah. Well-meaning women, not so good for David. Saul was furious and resented the song, and they credited tens of thousands to David. He complained, but only credited me with thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul watched David jealously from that day forward. The next day, an evil spirit from God came powerfully on Saul and began to rave inside the palace. David was playing the lyre as usual, but Saul was holding a spear and threw it, thinking, I'll pin David to the wall. But David got away from him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David, but had left Saul. Therefore Saul sent David away from him and made him commander over 1,000 men. David led the troops and continued to be successful in all his activities because the Lord was with him. But when Saul observed that David was very successful, he dreaded him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he was leading the troops. And Saul told David, here is my oldest daughter, Merab. I'll give her to you as a wife, if you will be a warrior for me and fight the Lord's battles. But Saul was thinking, I don't need to raise a hand against him. Let the hand of the Philistines be against him. This is very familiar if you think further on in the story. What does David do to Uriah? Oh, it's the same kind of thing. history repeats itself. This is this. Then David responded, "Who am I, and what is my family or my father's clan in thinking that I should become the king's son-in-law?" When it was time to give Saul's daughter Merab to David, she was given to Adriel the Moabite as a wife. Ooh, that's like a slap in the face. Oh, I promised her to you, but I'll give him someone else instead. That's a slap in the face to his honor. Now, Saul's daughter Michal loved David, which is interesting because later on she hates the man. Michal loved David, and when it was reported to Saul it pleased him, "I'll give her to him." And Saul thought, "She'll be a trap for him, and the hand of the Philistine will be against him." So Saul said to David a second time, "You can now be my son-in-law." Saul then ordered the servants, "Speak to David in privately and tell him, 'Look, the king is pleased with you, and all his servants love you. Therefore, you should become the king's son-in-law.'" Saul's servant repeated these words, "I am poor, commander." Let me skip on a little bit. Here it is. Verse 25. Then Saul replied, "Say this to David, the king desires no other bride price," yes, price you had to pay to get your bride, "than 100 Philistines' foreskins." Now, I doubt David's going to be like, "I'm going to cut this off the proper way." He's probably just going to cut the whole thing off and put it in a sack. Bringing trophies back is kind of weird, but it's not that uncommon in olden days. They used to do things like scalps. We've heard of scalping, or ears, left ears, fingers. Thumbs was popular. To prove how many you killed and get paid for it. You killed so many. So he says, 100 Philistine foreskins, take revenge on his enemies. And Saul intended David's death at the hands of the Philistines. And when the servants reported these terms to David, he was pleased to become the king's son-in-law. Before the wedding day arrived, David and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines. Wow. And brought their foreskins and presented them as a full payment to the king to become his son-in-law. That's pretty serious. And so he brought it back, and where was I? Let's just keep going. And Saul gave his daughter Michal to David, his wife, and Saul realized that the Lord was with David, and his daughter Michal loved him and became even more afraid of David. As a result, Saul was David's enemy from then on. And every time the Philistine commander came out to fight, David was more successful than all of Saul's officers. So his name became well known. Military history. Now, as we get into, there it is. As we get into chapter 19, we will see that David will have to flee from Saul because Saul's going to kill him. He's becoming too powerful, and he's going to kill him. So, and David will flee. And if you look at the map there, you can see where all he goes throughout this next few passages. He's all over the place, and he does a bunch of things. We're not going to go through everything that David does, but we will say that through it all, David remains loyal to Saul. Even though Saul's trying to kill him, he remains very loyal to him. I'll also point out that at one point, David comes to Nob, which is just east of Jerusalem. When he gets there, he takes Goliath's sword and eats from the table of shewbread, the bread of the presence, which is normally only eaten by the priest. Now, interesting enough, Saul was condemned for acting as a priest. Doing the sacrifice, taking the role of priest. Here, David does the role of the priest in eating the bread, and he's not condemned. It's very interesting. And there's some people talking about, well, there's different reasons why that people discuss, but we really, in the end, we don't really know why this. The Lord said it was okay for David, but it was not for Saul. It may have been where David's heart was at as more in Saul. I don't know. I think that's the most likely answer, is that David's heart was with God and Saul's was not. But in truth, we don't know the full thinking behind God, and we can't know the full thinking behind God. That's something we can't know. But it is an interesting a moment there that he's able to eat from this table. Now, because the priest let David eat there, Saul will have the priest killed. So Saul has definitely gone off the deep end, killing the priest of the Lord. And David will become a mercenary, even to Saul, and fight for even the Philistines. He'll fight against the Israelites and for the Israelites as a mercenary, getting paid for it. Let's go down to 1 Samuel 25. Let's go there. Let's talk about Nabal the Vile. This is kind of an important part. Like I said, we're skipping several things that's going on, but we don't need to cover every little thing. You guys can read it for yourself. Now, 1 Samuel 25, very first verse, very important. Samuel dies. The prophet who has been with Saul the entire time and then removed himself, he was a kingmaker, king breaker. Saul relied heavily on him. He anointed David. He anointed Saul. He was the last of the major. He was one of the last of the major judges. The prophet. He's dead. And all Israel assembled to mourn him, and they buried him in his home in Ramah. And then David went down to the wilderness of Paran. Now a man in Moab had business in Carmel, and he was a very rich man with 3,000 sheep, 1,000 goats, and was shearing his sheep in Carmel. And the man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and beautiful, but the man, a Calebite, was harsh and vile in his dealing. Nabal in the Hebrew means vile thing. So we don't need to actually be told that he was harsh. And we know from the name, he's a nasty guy. He even has the name nasty, vile thing. I don't know what kind of parents he had. Yes, I think I'm going to name my kid Vile Thing. Was this his real name? Or a name he'd picked up? I don't know. But he was Nabal. And he has thousands of a large herd of sheep and goats, and he will hire David as a mercenary to protect him from the raiders. But when it comes time to pay David and his men, well, he's a vile man. What do you think he does? I'm not going to pay you. I guess that's how you stay rich, right? Don't give out any of it. But Nabal's wife, unknown to her husband, paid the soldiers which is probably a good move. I mean, all these soldiers come and kill you if you don't pay them. But when Abigail returns from paying the soul, Nabal is on a drinking binge. And verse 37 says he became ill and he died 10 days later. So now you have Abigail, a wealthy widow, and David, the handsome leader of the mercenaries. David feels it's his obligation. He must marry her to show her his gratitude for her action on the behalf of him and his men for paying them. Abigail is willing. Remember, she doesn't have a lot of rights as a woman in the society. She needs a husband. So they marry. He also marries Abinoam from Jezreel for, I don't know, just because. But so he has two wives now, and he actually has three at the moment, but then Saul gives his daughter Michal, David's wife, away to another man. Because apparently she got left behind when he fled. And this was an act to insult David. You know, you can't hang on to your women. You can't. But we see here David is building a harem. Harem is woman, gold, and land. And he's starting to build up some women and some gold. He doesn't have the land yet, but he's working on it. And then we get to my personal favorite of the chapters in 1 Samuel. And I could go really in depth to this, but we're not going to. 1 Samuel 28. The Saul and the witch of Endor. It always looked like Endor to me, which always kind of reminded me of where the Ewoks are at in the Return of the Jedi, because they're from the planet Endor. Just saying, that's how I always read it when growing up. By this time Samuel had died. All Israel mourned from him and buried him in Ramah in the city, and Saul had removed the mediums and the spirituous land. Remember, you're not supposed to let these kind of people in your land, so don't let them live. Just kick them out. It says don't even let them live. This is part of the spiritualists, the medium. This is part of the other religions that were in the area. This is not part of the Jewish faith. God is the one you're talking to. God is the unique Elihu, the Greek, the great spirit. We'll say that. The unique spirit. That's the one you're supposed to be talking to. He's the one who's lead. You don't need all these others to talk to the ancient dead. You don't need to talk to the other gods or spirits out there. You're supposed to be focusing on Yahweh, who has given him his personal name, Yahweh. So they've kicked him out, and Saul has done this. But Samuel dies. So they're camped at Gilboa, and Saul sees the Philistine camp, and he's afraid. His heart pounded. And he inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him in his dreams or by Urim or by the prophets. Urim and Thummim are like these stones, these seer stones, that we actually don't know exactly what they were. The Mormons claim to have found them in the United States, but I'm going to put that as total bullshit. Because Joseph Smith was a swindler. Sorry. But And anyways, I'm not going to go into that. But anyways, but these seer stones, by the prophets. So he's not answering Saul. Remember, he's left Saul. And the Lord said to his servants, find me a woman who is a medium so I can consult her. Now, he's already kicked them all out. He's hunted her. There's a price on her head. Find me her. There is a woman in Edor who is a medium. And Saul disguises himself by putting on different clothes and sent out with 2 of his men. And they came to the woman at night. And Saul said, consult a spirit for me, bring me the one I tell you. Now it's interesting, the word spirit here is the Elohu. It's where the word Elohim comes from. It's like the spirit being. It's like from someone from the spirit realm. It's from this realm outside that we can't physically see. We may interact with, but they're the same realm of God. The gods are in. She calls up Samuel. And Samuel will rebuke him for calling him. Apparently she's able to do this. Nowhere in the Bible does it say this kind of behavior is actually not in magic, medium, spirit. We in our 21st century say it's all total bupkis or whatever. The Bible does not reject any of these ideas. It just says don't do it. Why? Because it's about you controlling the world around you when we need to be letting God be in control. He's the Lord of our lives. And so, and Samuel will rebuke him. Say, don't do this again. This is not right. He asked Samuel, Saul is told that him and his military will join Samuel and rebuke him and for calling him, and gives him a message of doom after that. And Saul will be killed, actually, at Mount Gilboa. I don't know if you can see that. That's Mount Gilboa today. Well, not today, but today-ish. I didn't take it this morning. I didn't even take it. Saul will become mortally wounded, and so he will kill himself. So he's not dying at the hand of his enemy. And the Philistines will hang his body, the body of Saul and some of his sons, on the wall of Beth-shan, and hang them up so that everyone can see that your king is dead. Now, some of the people of Jabesh Gilead will go in and steal the bodies and give them a proper burial. Now, when David is told of Saul's death, you think a man would be relieved, right? He's been being chased. And, Israel's crying out for leadership, Ishbal, which means Baal's man, is set to be the successor. Saul's sons are not followers of Yahweh. They are followers of Baal. Baal's man is going to take the place. And so David actually becomes really distraught when he finds out his king has died. And we see this is verse 11 of, what chapter am I on? 2 Samuel 1. Verse 11 of 2 Samuel 1. Then David took hold of his clothes and tore them, and all the men with him did the same. They mourned, wept, fasted until evening for those who died by the sword, for Saul, his son Jonathan, the Lord, the people, and the house of Israel. And then David, in 17, it says, David sang the following lament for Saul and his son Jonathan, and ordered the Judites be taught the song of the bow. It is written in the book of Yasher. There is a book of Yasher out there. If you go to the internet and type in the book of Yasher, there's a book out there. It is probably not the book he's talking about. At least not in the form that he's talking about it. I've read the book of Yasher. It's got all kinds of things in it that are not accurate at all. Like talking about steel when Cain was around. And there's all kinds of inaccuracies in it. So at least the form, it might be based off of it, but I want to say it's probably not the Yasher that they're talking about here. If you want to read the book of Yasher, you can. The Ethiopian Coptic Christians still hold to the book of Yasher as part of their Bible. Their Bible's like this thick. I have a copy of it in there. It's really thick because they have a bunch of books that aren't. But he says, the splendor of Israel lies slain in your heights. How the mighty have fallen. Do not tell in Gath, do not announce in the marketplace of Ashan. The daughters of the Philistines will rejoice, and the daughters of the uncircumcised celebrate. Mountains of Gilboa, let no dew or rain be on you, or the fields of offerings. He goes on like this. He's very distraught. I'm not going to read all whatever his song is. It's very distraught. But because the Lord's anointed person has fallen. And now David, who is the new anointed, takes the reign, but he never lost his respect for those who were coming before him. Very interesting. This is something that speaks to David, because a lot of we're going to see as we go through the Judges. I gave you guys a sheet handout a while back ago, and I got some more somewhere about the list of kings. We're going to see later on that they just kind of knock each other off. You want to be king? Sure, let's kill the next one. Some of their reigns are really quite short. We'll talk about those as we get to them. But David, he doesn't want Saul to die. He wants to just take the place, and he's really upset when Saul dies, even though he's been chasing him and trying to kill him. Really speaks out to David and his character. There's something there. All right. It is 7 o'clock. We will pick up with David as king next week. And we'll probably finish 2 Samuel next week. I make no promises, though, but we'll probably finish it next week. No, next week I'm here.